My family had a strange tradition. One day in the year, my family would leave the house and lock every door and window from the inside. Clearly, when we're going out, we're going to lock the front door from the outside, right? Except it wasn't just the front door. With the exception of the basement, every door would be locked against the center of the house with old-timey lock and catch. This meant going into all outermost rooms, locking yourself in, then exiting a door or window and locking that. Another part of this bizarre ritual, everyone would have to lock themselves inside their own bedrooms. We would exit through the window and then climb down a ladder if we were upstairs, my parents helping the little ones, which was always a thrill. My dad would lock up the front and back doors, and then we'd leave. For the kids, it was like a vacation. We stayed at a hotel for the night, or scheduled a vacation for that period. But as I grew up, it always felt like our parents were distracting us, keeping our mind off the wrongness of the situation. It felt too urgent when we left. And I always felt something was off about the house when we came back, as if our space had been violated. The basement door was never locked, but upon our arrival, always left wide open. One time, I broke a rule and learned why we closed the doors. I left my bedroom door open. It had been an accident. I was so caught up in the event, it slipped my mind. Afterwards, I thought if I could slip back inside and lock it, no one would know. That's why I went back at night and saw what I saw. That night, my house became twisted and warped to me. All the locks on the outside had a new meaning. They weren't just for keeping people out of the house. The night I learned what lived in the house when we were gone, what came out of the basement, what we were keeping inside the house. While we were gone, something else had moved into the house. Even before I saw it, I felt it watching me from inside the house. I felt as it watched me from my own bedroom window. My own face was inside the darkened bedroom, looking out at me. The thing inside held a lamp to show me its smiling face. It was completely naked. In the place of my two eyes, two black pits looked out the glass pane into the woods at me. The naked thing beckoned me with a finger. Let me out. I don't know what's inside the house. All I know is that it can never get out.
The perp slouched in the chair, his hands cuffed in his lap, his eye blackened, his bottom lip split wide. The detective sat across the table from him, wearing a petulant smirk.
"Were my officers a little rough?"
he asked sarcastically.
"You look a bit worse for the wear."
The perp shrugged, noncommittally.
"Some ice, perhaps?" Sure we got some around here somewhere.
I'll be fine.
For now, maybe.
The detective lit a cigarette and blew his smoke in the perp's face.
The Midnight Strangler. You killed how many women this last year? 12? 13? I have to tell you, as slight as you are, I find it hard to believe you had the strength to strangle some of them. They were bigger than you, stronger. You strike me as more of a fairy boy than a cold-blooded killer.
The perp stared across the table with empty eyes.
You didn't drug them. You didn't tie him up. A gun?
What does it matter? You've got me. You've already received a ton of press over this, and dare I say you'll receive more.
No doubt.
The detective chuckled smugly.
In fact, there's a presser waiting for me now. I just wanted to see if you give me some little tidbit to tantalize him with. So what'd you say? A gun? A knife?
No weapon.
Please. You don't expect me to believe that, do you?
The detective waited, but the perp remained stoically quiet.
You know, I hear the drugs they use for lethal injection burn like acid in your veins. They don't always work right away.
You don't say.
It's true. A terrible thing.
The detective crushed his cigarette in an aluminum ashtray.
You might want to consider cooperating.
I have a partner.
What's that? A partner? Bullshit.
He was bluffing, playing his little mind games.
That's a lie, and you know it. You're not talking to some imbecile here.
I can prove it.
Oh yeah? Prove it.
You should call your wife.
There was something in the perp's tone, perhaps. Or maybe it was his deadpan eyes. The detective retrieved his phone and dialed his wife's number. A few seconds later, all the color drained from his face.
Who is this?
The detective insisted urgently, and then he listened, his eyes filling with terror.
No, wait! Don't hang up!
The detective redialed the number, then again, and again.
He won't answer,
the perp said. The detective met the perp's eyes. First he felt rage, then all-consuming panic.
This is the part where you let me go.
The perp reached his hands forward, meaning to have the cuffs removed.
You'll have your little presser. Tell him it was a case of mistaken identity, and throw something in about your incompetence. Oh, and if you have me followed, she dies. Slowly. Once I'm safe, maybe you'll let her go.
For the first time, the perp hinted at a smile.
He's a psychotic fucker, though, so no guarantees.
I think of you often, but when the magnolia blooms, your presence becomes inescapable. Just like our time together, they grace the world with their beauty for such a brief season. You were the only woman I ever loved. I've tried finding that feeling, that spark again, but it seems only you can light the candle of my heart. It's a pity. I thought the only way to yours would begin with a scalp. You could have tried to reason. You could have screamed for help. Most of them do. But you simply acknowledged the fate you were dealt. Bound to the tree, ankles and wrists behind you. I can still picture the way your eyes stared into mine when I made the incision. Your ruby essence spilled from you onto the roots, onto the earth. It gushed onto my hands and face, and you still never made a sound, the deeper the blade went. The light in your eyes began to fade, yet you found the strength to say one last word. The one that will echo in my mind for the rest of my existence. Since that day, every other tree, all of the other vegetation, has slowly withered and died. Only the magnolia remains, still as vibrant as ever. I dread the day when its pearly petals begin to wilt. They seep with your blood, dripping onto the accursed ground below. One by one, they fall to the earth. The white petals now stained a dark crimson. Then the whispers begin, penetrating deeper within my mind. Inescapable, constant, maddening. Then I see you once more. A white dress, now blackened by gore. The skin beneath, crudely stitched back together in my forlorn attempt to repair what I have destroyed. Scalpel in hand, your eyes consumed by darkness now. You will be there wherever I turn. I know you will always find me, either here or in the depths of hell. I cannot escape. I cannot rest until the last petal falls. Scars cover my skin, a single word carved into my flesh hundreds of times over. Still begging an answer to your question. An answer I could never give you. Why?
So, we lived in downtown Honolulu in the early 90s. And we lived in this house on Viola Street, right across the street from Washington Intermediate School and the Boys and Girls Club of Honolulu. And I used to hang out there like every day. It's right across the street, and that was like the cool spot where all the kids would hang out. They had the pool tables downstairs, and then upstairs had like the wood shop and the library, and the librarian Auntie Koole would sell like the ice cake and the Rice Krispie treats and the brownies and stuff. And during the summertime they had like fun activities for kids. It's almost like summer fun, but like woodworking class and dance class and like sports and shan battle. I got invited to I guess like this little going away party that they had for one of the dance instructors. I don't know how we ended up telling ghost stories at the going away party, but we started telling ghost stories. And at first it was like, stuff from like scary stories to tell in the dark, because it was all into the book at the time. And then Auntie Koole started telling us a story about this little girl that died, and that she was actually seen by multiple kids at different times throughout the years in that building at the Boys and Girls Club. and then she would haunt the walkways and the stairwells. She wouldn't hurt anybody. She wouldn't even really do anything but reveal herself to kids and stuff. So, this is like, I think 1994, so back then, like, you wanted to take pictures, you had to like get the rental camera, or like using Polaroid, and so I think we had one Polaroid picture that we took a couple group pictures over there that night of the going away party, so we got to see like right away, like as a picture develops in the Polaroid, and we took one group picture of all of us there in the library, all of us kids, and had like this green thing, like this green ooze thing coming down the corner of the Polaroid picture that didn't fully develop. And if you look right by the side of where that green ooze thing was, like had this little girl's face. It was almost like when Doll's face, it was real pale. And yeah, it was just like this little girl's face there in the picture, the group picture of like me and 3 or 4 other kids.
The rain fell in a soft wall, droplets forming almost a mist around me. Droplets as cold as ice. The smell was thick and heavy of the rain, a contrast to its actual size and shape. Every couple of minutes it got heavier. The wind got harder, whipping trees and branches, leaves and dirt around. It howled like a birthing dog as rain poured down around my slowly soaking form. The clouds grew dark, thick and heavy, ill like a cigar smoker's wheeze. Like ink in milk, they grew shape, and the world felt sick. The wind and rain washing over me like a disease. My shirt was damp with the icy tears clinging to my chest as I watched the dark forms of clouds roll over the sickly sky. I noticed my breath spill across the landscape like ginseng ink on wet paper, chilled by the air and visible like smoke. And the world hung like a momentumless pendulum, and I stood still too, in anticipation. Forms, visages of terror, waltzed across the blackened sky. Paintings of horror, demons of realms beyond, moved against the wall of clouds and thick droplets of rain. Their roars washed with the wind, and it felt my scream in the back of my throat as I sung with these terrible beings, born of the storm and carried by its crashing waves of wind, creatures of branches and water, of the shadows behind the clouds and between the multitude of stars. They fell upon the earth and walked among the streets, footsteps echoing as I watched, tears streaming down my cheeks, their footprints embedded into the asphalt as they cried in anguish. Rivers formed in the gutters as they ripped houses off their foundations, knocked skyscrapers down with a swat, and bellowed their terrible calls into the night. I watched as they struck upon the world, From the streets past my apartment, I watched as fires burst to life, then shuddered to their death in the now hailing storm. Buildings crumbled and their debris carried like a haunting vigil in the wind. One of the beings turned to me, and if he had eyes, they would have been looking into my soul. And maybe he was, anyway. I felt him, like I felt the rain. I felt his judgment. Like ballerinas, they were swept away by their cruel curtain call. The clouds rolled forward, and the rain and wind silenced, and the beings washed away, carried back to wherever the storm had found them. I watched as the world crumbled and was washed away, washed clean by the storm.
Imagination. Those children that have it really have it. Stand out above the rest. Their stuffed bear isn't Bear, it's Roger or Queen Penelope. Despite our best attempts to later beat it out of their little heads with standardized tests and STEM curricula, we prize it in the young.
Is he out? Okay, great. They never make it all the way down from 10.
We hang their paintings on the fridge and talk about artistic potential. We stifle delighted giggles as we ask them about the opinions of their imaginary friends.
Michael, please untie me. I won't tell anyone. I swear across my heart, please.
But what about the kids who seem, well, dull? The ones who draw with only one color of crayon and when asked, always say the same thing. It's a doggy. Just like all the rest.
Okay, nurse. Scalpel. Making my first cut at the tummy.
We wanted to give those kids a chance to shine. To access that creative well we knew was always there. But that some children just couldn't uncover.
No! Stop it, Michael, please!
So we developed a drug. Imogen. A solution to a problem we thought needed fixing.
Can I get suction? We need to get rid of some of this blood. Alright, let's keep going then. The patient said he had butterflies in his tummy, but I'm not seeing them yet.
Michael Braddock had tied his best friend Brandon to a children's play table, after bludgeoning him with a rock from his mother's garden. As Brandon began to rouse from unconsciousness, Michael cut into his abdomen with a pair of his mother's sewing scissors. He was not the first, just the first that was caught on a nanny cam.
I don't, Brandon, Mommy, no, Dr. Braddock, focus. I think I found some of the butterflies, cutting deep.
The others had developed a sort of dissociative psychopathy, but had been deemed undiagnosable. They were too young. The DSM-5 was not equipped to categorize the pathology behind playtime executions or vivisections.
Do we have a pulse? Dang it. I think we lost him.
Michael and his mother often watched a dramatized medical procedural before bedtime. She told us she wanted him to be a surgeon one day, but for now, she just wanted him to play like the other kids, to turn cardboard boxes into spaceships, to be more imaginative. We just wanted to give kids like Michael a chance to shine.
Oh my god. Michael, what did you... Brandon! Brandon, sweetie, wake up! Michael, get mommy a cloth! Oh god! Brandon!
Abnormal violent dissociation in 3% of cases, but officially there's just the one. Michael Braddock. 5 years old. Subject 43 in the Imogen trials. His mother wanted him to be a surgeon one day.
No! Michael! Honey, it's Mommy! Please put down the scissors! Don't!
She probably never imagined it would happen so soon.
Doom music. Deadly. 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 Beast. Ferocious. Foul. Forgotten. Force and fangs and flagged. Fluid, fierce, and free. It comes for thee. It comes for me. You and me and three. A third. It slinks and slithers, slides along. We dither wrong and shake. Lo comes the yowl of the beast so foul. We but foul in mouth. It strikes at us from shadows deep, and up we leap in yowl. It comes and we should go. Bounding, screeching on its claws. We are dead and do not know. Its eyes are green with a reflective sheen, and fur like fuzzy snow. We drop the yarn. We toss the nip. We trip as the gray chunk comes. It demands a cheeseburger. We acquiesce. The mess we leave at last. N-E-D-M. My chapstick lost. I try for techno beats. You attempt to riff on an air guitar, but us, we are the least. We are as men, though dogged we were in a fracas from a fluffy foe. I look back now on that strange event, and it chills me to the bone. A firm hand shook me awake. I woke up and saw Tony standing over me.
Connor, what the fuck are you doing? Get up!
You're alive? I thought...
What are you talking about? Hop the fuck out of the foxhole! You're gonna have a sandy grave!
As I sprung up, the red flare of mortar shells traced across the sky, headed towards our camp. Their explosions rattled my bones, and the screams of my comrades rattled my soul. Where the hell is Sergeant Johnson? I asked Tony.
Dead for all we know. Bastards caught us sleeping. We need to take a position and return fire.
With a sense of deja vu, I took cover behind a box with Tony. A fight like this hadn't happened before, but their forces looked to strike at night. Never in these numbers though, and never this well armed. Me and Tony emptied our guns several times over, waiting for our comrades to get up. and to get into the fight, but mortar fire kept plummeting upon us. I doubt many of us survived. At some point, the sound of Tony's gun went silent. I looked over and saw him twitching. The fuckers had caught him right between the eyes. As the warmth drained from his corpse, I wondered what the point of it all was. Why were we even in the desert? What was this all for? Some damn dinosaur juice? Was it just that without war, the American economy couldn't function? How many young men had to die tonight? And for what purpose could it possibly serve? I purged those thoughts from my head and fixed a knife onto the end of my rifle and charged out to face the shadowy group in the desert, approaching the remains of our camp. What I saw almost didn't seem human. They looked more like oily shadows, some kind of fragment of human suffering stained into the earth's memory. I took one look down before I was filled with bullets, and it all went cold. A firm hand shook me awake.
Connor, what the fuck are you doing? Get up!
My first glimpse was on an overcast Wednesday evening. I was fishing on English Point, sipping my 5th beer, waiting. My seat gave me a pretty good vantage point. I could stare at the dark blue, churning waters, watching the unfeeling current, waiting for a bite. I saw a floating patch of orange and white, slowly drifting towards my ledge, riding the water lazily. I squinted hard to make out any details. I thought it was a forgotten life jacket or a boat seat, but it turned out to be a pair of faded swimming trunks. Trunks with stiff, rotting legs stuffed inside them. A chubby, pinkish figure face down in the surf. I stared as the corpse drifted closer to the shore, not more than 20 feet away from where I was sitting. It seemed to stick there, wallowing in the shallow water. I recognized the body, even though it was face down. The hair was a distinct shade of bleached caramel, and the arms, scarred from iron chains and crab pot webbing. I recognized the scar on the back of the right knee, where a thresher shark had found a target. It was definitely Eddie Moore, my first mate back when I had the Queen's Bounty. Decent enough crabber, capable even with his injured leg. He was a great soul, always friendly, inviting me to dinner every Sunday. Never was one to panic, even when the waves were fixing to pull us under. He would be singing a tune in his soft southern drawl. I slowly made my way over to where the body bobbed. I gently pulled out my pliers and saw where my hook had sunk into the left shoulder. I started to unhook the corpse. Then the bubbles came. Panic, splashing bubbles rising from the head. The body came alive. Damp hair swinging, the arms and legs of the body beginning to flail wildly, desperately reaching for something solid, still face down. all the while. I threw myself back and cut the line. The body went limp again. The energy sucked out in an instant. It bobbed there, teasing me to flip it over to see Eddie's face one more time. That's how it feeds. It's an ambush predator. Eddie had died on the Queen's Bounty 2 years ago. He was pulling up a crab pot on the starboard side, but it got entangled in the rope. The cleat holding the pot, weakened from years of use, had finally broken off, and the pot, along with the tangled Eddie, had been dragged down into the depths. This body was not his. I watched as the corpse turned quickly back to the horizon, an unseen force dragging it back out to open sea. I glared at the blip until it had sunk into the depths. Today, it sent Eddie. Last week, it sent my mother, wearing her daisy-patterned one-piece. Yesterday, it sent my beautiful Amelia in her maroon bikini. Maybe tomorrow, I'll finally see my son again.
I can't keep living like this. The worms crawl under my skin. Every inch is like a cut from a searing hot knife. It doesn't matter what I do. The worms will never stop. They're feeding on me, festering. I often ask myself what I did to deserve this fate. I do not know. All I know is that it will never stop. It has been 3,459 days since the first worm. They're multiplying, occupying the spaces that once belonged to my flesh. I tried to get help, but the doctors couldn't see the worms underneath my skin, telling me it was all inside my head. I don't know. I know what I know that the worms are real. Shaking, I pick up the knife. I spent hours sharpening for this moment. I take a deep breath and ease myself into the tub, lined with towels. They do not ease the constant itching. I hold the knife to my wrist and begin to carve, forcing the worms out. I cannot see them through the blood, but I feel them leaving my flesh. Relief. I carve more and more, taking away their food. The pain is nothing compared to the joy I feel knowing the worms must leave. I move onto my legs, the knife creaking against bone, blood rising and pooling. I'm finally free, but I'm so tired. So tired. I think I will take a nap before celebrating. I have defeated the Fleshworms.
We lost Jerry today. I'd have to say, he was one of the most interesting people. No, he was the most interesting that we've ever had come through our care home. At least, ever since I've been a resident. I can remember the day he arrived. His family just couldn't take care of him anymore. He was too distracting, they said. His daughter claimed he'd always been a quiet sort of guy. Until a day not long after he'd suffered a minor stroke. It was at that time that he developed a rather odd behavior, which he continued to demonstrate at the home. See, Jerry had a habit of peering out the window and shouting at the passers-by, "Pale horse! Pale horse!" It was quite unsettling, to say the least. I soon saw why his exhausted daughter just couldn't take it anymore, why his neighbors were happy to be rid of him. Now, I know what you might be thinking. He was just having a laugh at the expense of the local ladies. Well, this wasn't the case. He'd shout at ladies and lads alike. Old, young, he didn't seem to have a preference. He'd just go off with his pale horse, until the staff were able to get a hold of him and take him back to his room. He didn't do this sort of thing all the time, though, so it wasn't until something really bad happened that they took his window privileges away for good. It was a cold, rainy afternoon, as I recollect. I remember there being a lot of close calls with the local traffic passing by. Lots of squealing of brakes and such. All of a sudden, Jerry smashed against a window and starts up with his business, fist pounding, going about like a madman. His eyes are white with passion, spit flying from his lips as he shouted himself nearly hoarse. Right as the staff were struggling to haul the frail, 85-year-old man away, that's when we heard the crash. It was like a bomb had gone off, it seemed. 16 dead. School children. It was then that the wheels in my head started turning. Now that I thought of it, after every one of Jerry's incidents, there had been an ambulance which passed by shortly after. An elderly woman down the road had passed one time. A middle-aged man expired from a heart attack, we later heard. Then, there was the poor mother and children who were killed by their own husband and father. Soon, I knew what he was on about. That's why when I saw him sitting in his chair in the corner of his room where I'd taken up visiting him upon an evening, weakly whispering over and over to himself, "Pale horse, pale horse, pale horse," I asked him direct, "You've been seeing death riding about on his pale horse, haven't you, Jerry?" He just looked at me, smiled, closed his eyes, and passed me into an eternal slumber.
Death does not part, only lack of love.
He thrust his spade into the hollowed ground. The tip of it bit down into the soil like Adam's teeth did the storied apple. Hungry and starving for her. Again and again, building up a rhythm, his tool thrust steadily, repeatedly, fueled by unshakable optimism. Oh, sweet Ophelia, the sound of her name on his breath, in awful contrast to the hum of the flies swarming around him, bumping into one another, drunk from his alcohol-laced sweat. 9, 10, his muscles tense, his shirt drenched. 26, 27, these damned mosquitoes, they never relent. 37, 38, must not keep her waiting, just work through the pain. It can't be much farther, can it? He thought to himself, after around the 40th spadeful of earth dug up and removed. In his heart and in his mind, she was lying there, waiting patiently for him, like Sleeping Beauty, breathless with anticipation of their reunion. He continues digging, 50, 60, 70 some odd measures of dirt removed, at least double that amount after, and more still to follow those. He digs until the spade hits the wood of her casket. Thunk. It is the sound of sweet affirmation. His weary, bone-driven muscles are reinvigorated. He attempts to wipe the sweat from his brow with an already soaked forearm, as useless an effort as attempting to drown a fish in water. Perspiration continued to burn his eyes. It doesn't take much longer before he is reunited with sweet Ophelia. There she lay, just as he last saw her, all dressed in white, like an angel, visiting the earth. Her hair was immaculate, every curl arranged perfectly. Her lipstick, rose pink, and it still tasted like cotton candy.
Just a taste for now,
he whispered into her ear before carefully placing her inside the car. He positioned her in the front passenger seat and strapped her in snugly. A half-folded-up map of the area falls from the passenger side overhead visor. A path is marked, highlighting the road from what was to be their home to here, from sanctuary to sepulcher. Not that it mattered. He knew where he was going. The radio hinted at familiar tunes through the static, too distorted to decipher, mangled and merged meanings, too distant to discern. Every set of headlights heralded another brush with death. Once familiar road signs were now squiggly hieroglyphs warning of the dangers he'd just ignored. He only had a quarter of a tank of gas and half a bottle of gin left by the time he reached the straightaway. There was no turning back. He would see to it that they would be together again. Nothing would separate them this time. Richie Valens ferried them through their sleepwalk via an old record player as they entered the living room. From the moment they passed by the empty mahogany china cabinet, it was clear that tonight was a special night. The dining room table was set with care, and provisions were made, enough for two. Red wine would flow like water. Glasses would never be empty, and assorted foods would cover the table, course by course. Jellies filled bellies, and the smell of garlic seasoned the air. She sat at one end of the table, patient and as still as stone. He sat at the other end, simultaneously guest and host, waiter and busser. The wedding gown she wore was beautiful, a shadow of its former glory, but undeniably magnificent. He could only see the eternally radiant beauty of her. "Can I tell you something?" he began, pausing momentarily to allow her time enough to reply. "You look absolutely ravishing tonight." He hung his head and bashfully took another sip of wine. He smiled as he began unbuttoning his shirt. The look in his eyes was craven. Rising from his chair slowly, it barely made a sound as its legs slid across the hardwood floor. His eyes remained focused on her as he cleared everything from the table onto the floor, making his way around it towards her. There was pink champagne on ice in the upstairs bedroom. The sheets on the bed were of satin, and the bathtub was filled with bubbles. No expense was spared, from the scented oils to pink feathered handcuffs. With the aid of 69 positions of the Kama Sutra manual, no fantasy would be too far-fetched. No feline nicknamed orifice too feral to be fucked. With an assortment of sensual surprises, the boudoir was a bordello of bohemian hedonism, but they never made it that far. He took her by the hand and made his conquest there on the dining room table. There was need for neither foreplay nor formality. He had been known to this woman countless times before, as intimate as only the most physical of physicians ever could. He unbuckled his pants and kissed her passionately as he climbed on top of her, with one hand beneath her hips and another slicked with his own saliva, curled into a fist, acting as a bridge between bodies. He licked and nibbled her ear. His manhood throbbed in the grip of his fist. He was convulsing in anticipation of their first contact. He was delicate about penetration, allowing her a moment to adapt to every pulsating inch. She made no sound to indicate discomfort. Once he found himself inside her, he relocated both his hands to her hips and began long-stroking gyrations that led to multiple ejaculations and blissful moments of exasperation between erections, deeper and deeper, just a little deeper each time. When the sensation comes, keep holding on. When the miracle comes, stay inside, take hold, and never let her go. I was awakened by something shaking my shoulder. A hand. I startled. What the fuck? There was a large, hairy creature sitting next to me on my bed.
You left me hanging,
it said. I slithered up as close to my headboard as was humanly possible. What?
Your story. You had me kill that family in their sleep and eat their dad's liver. And then you just quit writing.
What the hell was this beast talking about? I had written a story earlier that ended in just that way, but...
I'm a sensitive creature,
it said.
You gotta give me a better ending than that.
Are you saying you're my creature? From my story?
Of course I am, dumbass. Don't you recognize me?
I had to admit, the creature looked just as I had imagined it when I had written the story. But, Jesus.
And her, too,
it said.
You left her hanging, too.
Don't leave me like this.
A little girl, who was now standing beside my bed, dripping blood from her stump of an arm, said. She looked suspiciously like a character from a story I'd written a few days back.
You had the alligator bite off my arm and then you just left me.
Come on, dude,
the beast said rather unpleasantly.
You gotta help us out here.
I'll spare you the conversation that ensued about dreams and impossibilities. Instead, I'll cut straight to the part where I went to my computer to finish their stories. In short, this is what I wrote. After slaughtering the family, the creature began rediscovering his humanity. He heard a little girl crying on the back porch, so he went to investigate. Finding the poor lass crumpled and bleeding on the steps, he quickly put a tourniquet around her stump, scooped her up in his arms, and started running towards the nearest hospital.
Yeah, I like that,
the creature commented. As he crossed the street, however, a garbage truck came out of nowhere and ran the pair, killing them both. I waited. Nothing but silence. Interestingly, but expectedly, when I looked behind me, both the creature and the little girl were gone. And before you think badly of me for killing off the little girl, I remind you of this. She was a fictional character. Satisfied that my work was done, I started back to bed. I heard a large truck pull up in front of my house, which caused me pause. A few moments later, there was a knock at my door. Apprehensively, I answered and found a garbage truck at my curb and a man, or something like a man, standing on my porch. The man had no face, no features, no fingers. He looked like a clay figure that was only half finished. It occurred to me that I'd hardly considered him as I'd written about the truck. I knew what I had to do. "Follow me," I said, and led him back to my computer.
The police had gotten a call for howling at 156 Palm Street. That happened to be a warehouse. When they got in, it was dark and quiet. That was normal. They heard a whimper in the darkness. They followed the wretched sound to a cage where the whimpers went into growls, and then a bark. They shined the light into the cage to see a man, pale and malnourished. He looked them in the eyes with fear and let out a low growl. They asked him why he didn't answer, only growled more. When they went to open the cage, he stopped, then proceeded to crawl out. He motioned towards the corner, still on his hands and knees. They turned on the lights. The lights brought the many cages to light. Some normal men and women, and some dogs. It was horrifying. The people were hairy, and the dogs looked of patchwork. There was a door which they went to open. They were already on their toes with horror. What they saw was worse than anything they could have expected. There was what looked like an Ed Gein creation. It walked on its 4 legs, but it wasn't natural. It had the body structure of a dog, but had skin stretched over it. It did not look like a shaved dog. It looked like it was born that way. It had human eyes, and it looked frail. What was in the corner was potentially worse. It was a person on their hands and knees, covered in golden fur, with dark, beady eyes. It looked at them, the human hands and feet covered in golden fur was off-putting. It was unnatural, but so well done. They put together a theory. Someone was breeding dogs and people. And these were the epitome, the pinnacle. How would they bust whoever this is or was? What will they do with the poor animals and people? What would the culprit do with the 2 police that were in there if they found them? And most importantly, what if these creatures are released into the wild?
Subscribe, like, comment, share. And I'll see you next week with a brand new episode of The Scary Show.